racial disparities in drug court outcomes. So over the years in the Black community, many have said that drug courts punish Black and brown people differently than white people. Talk to me about your research in this area.
So, yes, in some drug courts, research, and actually some of the research that I did, this would have been 2012, with a drug court in the South, found that African-American participants were punished, or the language they use in the drug court model, they received sanctions, consequences, punishments, at a more severe level than their white counterparts. And there was evidence of that. Now, again, that's limited to that one drug court. Not that the magnitude of the problem, I'm sure, is much larger, right? But it's limited to that one court. Drug courts have been around since 1989. They are, as I shared earlier, an alternative to incarceration for individuals that have substance use disorders, addictions. And to put it simply, the thinking is, if you have a drug problem and you've been arrested for maybe a felony possession charge because you possessed heroin for your personal use, we can either put you in jail or we can give you treatment services outside of jail, but under the supervision of the criminal justice system. So the thinking is, if we treat the underlying issue, the core issue, addiction, folks will achieve recovery from addiction and hence stay out of the criminal justice system. So it is a treatment rehabilitative process as compared to the historically punitive incarceration model of criminal justice. Drug courts, we have 30 years of evidence they work. There's no doubt about it. Meaning, if you have two matched groups, and we have 30 years of evidence doing these types of studies, these are matched groups, meaning they're similar in key characteristics: age, gender, race, drug of choice, etc. And this group does probation, regular probation, and this group does treatment court. Those that do treatment court, drug court, stay out of the criminal justice system more so than those that do probation as usual. And so those that do treatment court have a lower criminal recidivism rate than those that do regular probation. We have 30 years, and I don't think I'm exaggerating if I say hundreds of studies to say treatment courts work as a whole. But now, when we take a look at race and outcomes, here's where we start to see the alarming and unfortunate trend of racial disparities, particularly in graduation rates. And so, do drug courts work? Absolutely. As a whole, they work. No credible researcher would even challenge that anymore. They work. Are drug courts equally effective across race? No. Now, this is not universal to all programs, but there are many programs. There is enough of a trend that African Americans graduate less than their white counterparts. So here would be a recent example. Colleagues and I recently evaluated a Midwestern state, and we gathered data from 30 types of treatment courts. So when we say treatment courts, they all operate under the same philosophy. Let's treat the issue in the hopes of achieving recovery that will help people stay out of the system, that will minimize rearrest. So you have mental health courts. If we treat mental illness, that will lower recidivism rates. Drug courts, if we treat addiction. We have veterans courts. We treat issues maybe related to trauma, alcohol use, drug use with veterans. We treat the issue, they stay out of the system. In this Midwestern state, the graduation rate for white participants in 30 treatment courts across the state was about, and I don't know the exact, but around 65 to 70% of white participants in these treatment courts graduated. The graduation rate for every other race studied. So Hispanics, African Americans, American Indians, and those identified as biracial were all below 30%. Wow. So the issue is, do treatment courts work? Are they equally as effective for all races? The answer is, it's not, it's not to all, but in general, no. We know that there are disparities in key outcomes. And the main outcome is certainly graduation, right? If you graduate, it varies from court to court, but you could get your criminal case or cases dismissed. You could potentially get it expunged from your record, depending on, certainly the state laws. But ultimately, you tend to be out of the criminal justice system. If you're terminated from the program, number one, you're still in the system. Number two, again, depending on the program, you may have to restart the whole process. And when I mean you're kicked out of drug court, now you're back at like day one. Hey, I have a pending felony possession charge and I need to do something about it. And so my research is, drug courts work, yes. In some programs, but there's a strong trend, but in some programs, are there racial disparities in graduation rates where white participants graduate much more often than other races and ethnicities? Yes. And that's where my research comes in to say, well, why do we think this happens?